Hello again, everyone, and this time I actually get to sit down, which I'm quite excited by. But I'm even more excited to welcome the panel for this In Conversation debate. Just conversation, really, which is on the wider theme of opportunity, because we've been talking quite a lot about skills, the economy, housing, quite specific areas. And I wanted to get back to that sort of overall idea of what opportunity means to people. And I'm delighted to have two brilliant people to talk about that. To my immediate left is Penny Mordaunt, the leader of the House of Commons, Lord President of the Privy Council, global superstar of the recent coronation, arguably eclipsing even the King himself, and Dr. Frank Luntz, who is the world's leading expert on political language, the creator of, the popularizer of phrases such as climate change, which we all have to thank you for, Frank, but also has been working with the CPS to try and understand attitudes within the UK on sort of very fundamental issues about opportunity, freedom, fairness, and what people actually are motivated by these days. So thank you both very much for joining us. And to start with you, Frank, what does opportunity mean to the public? We've got this whole conference with the word opportunity in big letters. Is that something that resounds with the public in the way it did in Margaret Thatcher's day?
No.
So we should all just pack up.
Yes, I can just walk away right now. No, we just finished, and you're all going to hear about it over the next 10 days. We looked at some of the key attributes and what matters to the public: freedom, security, fairness, opportunity, prosperity. And of all of them, opportunity seems to matter least. And there are two reasons for this. Number one is that opportunity is for somebody else, not for them. And number two, they've been promised this for decade after decade after decade, and they don't see it. They don't feel it. And I have to say, just to start this conversation off, and by the way, it is such an honor for me to be sitting with you. You can see how much
feeling is mutual, Frank.
I even dress for the occasion. We in America do not copy our language, do not copy our ideology, do not copy our behavior. I know that it is said that if it happens in America, it eventually comes over to the UK. God help you if it does. We are in a mess right now. We are a shit. I don't know if I'm allowed to use the language, but we are a shit show.
We'll bleep it out on the live stream.
And it's one of the reasons why I so appreciated your participation, your leadership. But the coronation, it's tradition. It's a legacy. It's history. And there's a whole process to it. And we've lost that in America. We've lost the respect. We've lost the appreciation for history. And it's why I'm here in the UK and not in the US right now today, is because I can't stand it. That we've given up on freedom. We don't respect freedom. We don't respect opportunity. We don't respect the things that brought us to where we are. Look at this room. I'm looking at the most incredibly regal history, and our own kids don't know anything about it. Help.
Penny,
so I'm going to be slightly more upbeat than Frank, but I mean, let's just start with the coronation and that image. Why do you think it was that was such a powerful image? It really wasn't about me, but that whole event was about service. It was about duty, and it was a celebration of the country. And I sometimes think that we politicians talk about opportunity in a particular way, meaning what we can give to people. That's our job, right, is to extend opportunity. Whereas I think the public view it in a very different way. And to them, it's about what they can do for their country. And part of the frustration that people feel about politics is not that we're a bunch of useless rotters up in Westminster, although they do feel that. It is that they have solutions to problems and answers that they want to be able to act on. I'm just going to prove my point here and boldly do Frank's job and do a quick bit of audience participation, because I know this is after lunch shift, and I don't want anyone to fall asleep during this shift. Just put your hands up if you volunteer for an organization other than a political party on a regular basis. Okay, keep your hands up or put your hands up if you give to charity or you fundraise for an organization. Put your hands up if you took on extra work during the pandemic to help your communities. Put your hands up if you've run a business or you employ someone. Put your hands up if you have run for office or you've been a candidate or you're running for Mayor of London. I saw Daniel Korski knocking around. Okay, and how many of you have served in the Blue Light Services or the Armed Forces? Okay, right. Now, I would have been a bit disappointed at the Thatcher conference if you had not done that, and I would have had to have left the stage by now, but you are people, what that demonstrates is you are people that step up and take responsibility. That's what you do. And I think that's what most people in this country feel and do. It's about how they feel about their communities, what they want to do for their communities and their country. And people feel like that for lots of different ways. Sometimes the upbringing they had, some event that made them feel that way about their country. For me, I always say I know exactly the moment, and it was when I was 9 years old, standing on the hot walls in Portsmouth, watching the Falklands Task Force leave Portsmouth Harbour. I'd seen service and duty, and I knew that was something bigger than myself that was out there, and I knew it was important that that task force left because it showed we stood up to bullies, and Thatcher's resolve at the time showed that. And that responsibility that you feel towards each other, that to me is what opportunity is about, because opportunity is an attitude, yes, of country and government, but mostly for individuals. And that approach to opportunity, I think, is the biggest difference between the two political parties at the moment.
So let me give you a statistic. We asked, this is 2 years ago now, are you invested in your country, and do you think your country is invested in you? 46% said yes, they're invested in their country, which means less than half. More people aren't invested in the UK than are. But the troublesome response is only 27% believe that their country is invested in them. It's the equivalent of loving someone and they don't love you back. 1 out of 4 think their country's invested. This country does the NHS, it does transport, it does education. This is the country that gave birth to us. And the public has come to reject it. So I hate being the pessimist, but I am, and thank God that there's an optimist here. But the fact that we now don't appreciate and celebrate what created buildings like this and legacies like the one that you all share, that's my problem, and that's my fear.
I think we do still feel that way. The coronation, the accession council, all of those things, all those amazing events, is when we see flashes of it. But it is alive and well in our communities every single day. People don't associate that with their government, and effective governments foster that. They foster a sense of what the nation is about. I mean, Thatcher did this so well. She knew that her job was not just to have a to-do list, and she clearly did. She had a plan when she came into office, but she had a to-be list as well. And this is so important for politicians because government can only do so much, Whitehall can only do so much, local government can only do so much. Unless you can motivate people and you instill trust in the things that are important, democracy, capitalism, all things that you're worried about, I'm worried about, that are under threat, that's what we need to foster faith in. Those systems are like Tinkerbell the fairy. If you stop believing in them, they cease to work. And that is why we have to work doubly hard, whatever way we're coming at this, as a pollster, as politicians, as community leaders. That's why we have to work especially hard now, because we are encountering some things that we have never seen before. On social media, disinformation, deepfake, these are new and severe challenges to our democracy.
So you've been working on this, and I need your help. In America right now, 40%, we're approaching a majority, do not believe in the electoral system, believe that democracy failed. Among Republicans, half believe that Donald Trump was elected, and he was not. We're losing faith in capitalism. We're losing faith, we lost faith in the media. It's not losing, it's gone. So if we have lost faith in the system and the people who run those systems, how do we get it back?
Well, we have to remind people what it is we all have in common. I think the situation we are facing is similar but different to what is happening in the States, in part because in the US you have much greater political membership of political parties. It is much more divided along political lines.
And it was striking here, you said who volunteers and then who stood for election, and the hands went down.
Yeah, so it's less political, but there is, people are frightened. The world is a frightening place. Technological change, new challenges that people haven't got a hope of understanding, let alone combating. All of these things lead to people believing conspiracy theories or having distrust in institutions. We've got to work very hard at building trust in those institutions, but that's not something that you can follow a recipe and arrive at. You have to listen to people and you have to deliver for them in politics. But I think also you have to be completely dedicated to calling out those people who are attacking the things that we have in common and these institutions. They're strong institutions, and I always say, because people often point to Brexit as a sign of how divided the nation is and how fragile we are. I say, no, you're wrong. Division is not a sign of weakness. There are nations where there is no division, and they are not strong nations. In fact, the lack of division and plurality of thought makes them weak nations. And Brexit was an amazing time, but our institutions got us through it. Parliament, believe it or not, the courts, we gradually crunched through the situation, and we moved forward. And that is the sign of a strong nation. And I've been on one side of that argument, but I've always tried to point to those strong institutions and why people can have trust in them. And anyone in a position of responsibility now, I'm going to go from you to the House of Commons. There's going to be a debate on the floor of the House on standards, all sorts of things I'm sure that have been in the news recently will come up. We have to be really strong about calling out people who are attacking institutions, people who are attacking the House for carrying out its work, people who are attacking the media. I never thought I'd be defending the BBC, but people who are attacking decent journalism. We have to stand up for these things, because the price of not doing so is going to be very grave indeed.
So here's the challenge. And by the way, if you're going to Parliament, if I give you 10 pounds, will you give me a ride?
I'm just thinking, can we put you on the roof rack? We might be able to.
It might be a tight squeeze. We have Donald Trump. Who's American here? Anybody? Okay, we got a few of you. Are you happy with the former president? Are you happy the fact he's been indicted twice? Are you happy that he was convicted of sexual assault? That he's calling this lies, damn lies, and whatever else he says? He's challenging the institutions. He's challenging all the things that keep us together as a country. And that in the end, his supporters believe him. They believe it's a witch hunt. And I blame the government for some of this. When they went and searched in Mar-a-Lago, it was now, 3 months ago? He had the stage for a week before they explained what they were looking for. When he was convicted, found guilty of assault, he insulted the woman that he assaulted, and the audience laughed about it up in New Hampshire. It was a disgrace. He's now been indicted on some serious charges with those documents that he had in his house. And his numbers, every single time, his polling numbers go up, not down. How do you hold that individual accountable?
So I mean, what you both seem to be saying, and I'm quite enjoying this because I just kind of wind you up and let you go, I barely have to do anything, is effectively one of the issues around opportunity is that people look at the top of their society, they look at the people who are setting examples, and if they see dysfunction there, if they feel that merit is not being rewarded, then they're going to be less, in their own lives, they're going to take a bit, to see it as a harder to get on, or less encouraged, or less willing to get involved.
Look, I think you can't separate this, and part of the answer to this does lie in government or whatever institution you're talking about being effective and doing the right thing and demonstrating the values that the public share. In my book, I list...
Greater, available in all good bookshops now?
I call it the timeline of trust decay, and it doesn't just list everything that politicians have got up to. It takes over about a decade. Every single ethical lapse, failure, and it's across every institution, business, religious organizations, you name it. And it's a failure of leadership in all of these areas, but it's also about people not delivering and not living up to expectations. And this is why the Prime Minister's right to focus on 5 priorities and demonstrate that government can deliver on things just as much as it's important to get those things done. He's demonstrating that government can deliver and trying to win back trust that way. But we have to modernize in order to do this. Parliament, for example. Someone will come and see me in my surgery who may have ordered something on Amazon that afternoon and it's going to arrive in 3 hours, and I have to explain to them why it's going to take 4 years for the thing they really care about to happen. And the way we approach legislation, how we regulate, we have all these new possibilities now with technology. And unless we adapt and embrace them faster, we can't deliver on any area. And I think this is the biggest challenge for government. There's a lot of things that we've done well, there's a lot of things that we're going to do, but we have to pick up the pace. And part of the answer, it's not the whole answer, but part of the answer is being able to look at someone and say, this thing works now. It didn't used to, it does now, and your life is different and improved because of it. People will trust their government, not when the government persuades them that they've understood them, but when they feel understood and invested in by us.
Ken, let me just, I want to take notes because I want to write about it, but it's rude for me to take on my phone, so I won't do it. So someone please remind me of this point because I will forget it. Here's my problem, and I probably should do this on this stage right now, and I don't mean to cause anyone an awkwardness, but how many of you in this room know someone who died during COVID, from COVID? Raise your hands. I would hope, and he's a friend of mine, I went to university with him, and I'm reading what happened with your Prime Minister during that period, what was happening in his office. And that's problematic. And we're so partisan right now that we don't call out what we should. I publicly, when I make a mistake in polling, I publicly announce it, I put it in writing, because I want people to know, because I have to be held accountable for you to trust me. What you said is government at its best. The problem is too often we're seeing government at its worst, where people look you straight in the eye and tell you a lie. And I don't know how to get around that.
But Frank, you said earlier that one of the reasons opportunity doesn't resonate with people is because they just don't, they've had decades of disappointment, that they just don't see it in their own lives. So where are the obstacles? Where are the things that government, where are the things that people perceive that they are being, their opportunity in their own lives is being blocked?
The first thing is that the politicians do not say what they mean and mean what they say and then do what they say. They say anything. I know that Boris is often compared to Trump. That is a BS comparison. Boris Johnson has written more books than Donald Trump has read. Okay, I was told that conservatives don't have a sense of humor. How about this one? When Boris was prime minister, what is the new definition? You're going to kill me for this. What is the new definition of chaos? Father's Day at 10 Downing Street. Ma'am, I'll explain it to you when the panel is done. They mishear them, and they mishear them deliberately. I'll give you 3 examples. We talk in this room, in this beautiful place, about growth. I listened to your former Liz Truss, growth, growth, growth. The public doesn't know what growth is. You all do, but if you're in this room, you're not normal. I shouldn't say that. If you're in this room, you're not typical. Growth means nothing to the average worker, to the people going to clean up tonight, this place. They don't know about growth. They understand a healthy economy. And they don't understand capitalism, because capitalism also is for people in this room. What's so frustrating to me is that the leadership speaks in a language that the public doesn't understand, because they don't deal with it. So that's the first thing. The second challenge is, it's not just politicians, it's also the business community. If you're in business in this room, you have one skill above all else that the public respects, and that's being a problem solver. And they don't see that in politics. They see the problems go on, and the debates go on, and it never solves itself. That's why during the period of Brexit, when they were trying to get a Brexit agreement, it was destroying whatever credibility government still had, because they couldn't even agree on that. So as a pollster, all I hear is the public saying they don't understand me, they don't get me, which is why your definition, not just talking about something, but actually getting it off the table, is brilliant. And it's why I'm so grateful to be here, and why I look forward to the next 10 years, because I think I'm going to be seeing you in significant places. But your colleagues are failing.
So let me again try and cheer everyone up. So where I agree with Frank on a lot of things, and I think that particularly on issues like healthcare and social care and housing, which matter so much to people, these are problems that we have to make more progress on. You had the wonderful Gillian early on today. We have knocked it out the park on education reforms, on tangible improvements to that first rung of the ladder for people. Healthcare needs the same treatment, and we have got to do more on making sure that everyone can get a home in good time to have a family and all the other stuff they want. That is absolutely right. What I would also say is that politics is a team game, and all leadership candidates emphasize this when they're running for the job, that they're going to build a team. But and quite often some people forget they're part of a team, and that's what you've seen in the examples you have pointed to. I think that the COVID inquiry, which is so important, not just to give people who put their hands up earlier in the room answers, but also for the resilience of the country. The whole point of this exercise is to make us more resilient in the future, to help us prepare better. And I don't know what is in other people's evidence. I've handed all my evidence full and complete. But I think what people will also see is some pretty heroic activity in Whitehall and amongst some politicians too, about getting the right things to happen and the attention to detail, the effort that went into particular things. Politics is a collective endeavor, and it amazes me that in both the US and the UK, even though we know it is a failed model of leadership, the top guy is always the focus. Whereas actually it's the team, and I don't just mean the cabinet and a parliamentary party, it's the country. I said to the Prime Minister, your team is the nation. And we have to reframe our story in those terms. And that's why the culture wars and all of that doesn't help, because we're here for everyone. And unless we can pull the nation's talents together, unless we can get people focused on some national missions, and I started writing about national missions way before Keir Starmer decided to write about them. But these things are important. Social care, housing, it requires all of us. And that's why I am unapologetic about talking about building more and taxing less, and not talking about culture wars, because it doesn't move the country forward.
So, Frank, you mentioned there, we've talked a lot about politics, but Frank, you mentioned business and enterprise. And in the polling you did for us 2 years ago, you asked, the final question you asked was, when I look at Britain's political leaders, I sometimes just think, F them all. And got a surprise.
There's a common theme to me in this kind of language.
Yeah.
So this table right here, I apologize to everybody else.
But you also asked the same about business leaders and got a pretty negative response. And then when you ask people, what do you associate with business leaders, they didn't say creating employment, growth, jobs, opportunity, which ultimately has to come from the private sector. They said things like, greedy profiteering. There was an image problem in business as well.
So my issue that you clearly address in your career every single day is being able to explain things that make sense, that are reasonable, sensible, and responsible, which are the 3 words, for those of you taking notes about communication, those are the 3 attributes that your population wants more than anything else: reasonable, sensible, and responsible. And there are so few people in the business community that actually speak that way. So I know you're a human being, but it's something happens when they put on these suits and they make the tie too tight, or when they put on other clothing, they lose their humanity. And I'm sorry if I sound agitated, but I actually am, because it's in this room. If you can't communicate it effectively, who can? And if you're not putting pressure on them to change what they say, because they're the ultimate public servants. They have to serve their customers, they have to serve their employees, and they have to serve the communities that they are in. And they seem to forget that in their messaging and communication. Just a little bit of empathy, and they'll get the opportunity to have more profitability.
Look, I think that's absolutely right, and I think we have to do more to explain to people why everything matters. Everything we care about is driven and only made possible through the wealth creators and the business community. I have advocated that people should have in their annual reports how many nurses they've enabled to be funded. We have to make it simple for people to understand the connection between good news on the business pages and what that means to their lives. Higher wages, improved opportunity, better healthcare services, all of these things. But I think the flip side is also true. And when I was doing research for Greater, I asked a lot of business organizations where they thought they ranked in terms of how government viewed them. And the average score was about 6 out of 10, which means, not a great deal. And I think we need to do more and explain why we're doing it to enable people to take those risks to set up another business, particularly small businesses, which are the absolute backbone of our economy. The biggest asks for them are VAT thresholds. There's obviously lots of debate about IR35. There's a lot of work that CPS has done on what would really get things going again and supporting people to do that. What are the things that we want to see people do and support them doing it? And clearly we've had some very challenging times through the pandemic in being able to help everyone in the way that we would have liked. But that's what we should really be focusing on, but explaining why we're doing it. And the final piece in this puzzle is making the consumer king again. Because people, you know, if they're having difficulty changing their contract or, you know, moving their broadband provider or cancelling their Sky contract and all of these things, that tells them that they're not king. And the work John Penrose has been doing about actually getting that in a much better place is what we should be running towards. And, you know, a bit more of that, restore the customer as king and talk up the wealth creators, I think we'd be in a lot better place.
So I want to get to the core of this. I'm going to ask you a question, and then I'm going to ask you based on the response. The United Kingdom, are the best days for this country ahead of you or behind you? Not what you want it to be, but what you absolutely believe. Are the best days for the UK in the future or in the past? Who says the past? Raise your hands. Who says the future? Raise your hands. Okay, clearly I've not judged the room.
I think we're Team Penny, not Team Frank in the audience.
This is very interesting because I write about this a lot, and quite often our country is accused of being nostalgic and that we're in love with the past. And I joke about this, that we're obsessed with all things vintage. I even found in my research that you can buy for your garden for £3,000 your very own Gothic Abbey garden ruin kit. It's like the Jacob Rees-Mogg of garden ornaments. It's comparatively new, but channeling antiquity. We love old stuff, but we're not nostalgic for outside lavatories or scurvy. We're nostalgic about a time when it was simpler. And it was easier to understand how to get things done. It's why we make, you know, so many movies about, you know, the war effort and all of that. The future is frightening. The future is highly complicated, and that's why people want simple answers. And what we have to do as think tanks and as politicians is find answers, but also reassure people, protect people, and give them the confidence that you can go into any room and just as many hands will go up. That's what we have to do. I'm a politician, so it's, you know, I have to be optimistic.
Don't tell people that.
I have to be optimistic. But I really am. And this is why this is such a critical moment. We have all of this opportunity ahead of us, all this potential, and we need to capitalize on it. We need to be able to compete. We need to be able to deliver on things. You're looking at me saying she's gone into politician speak again, but it is true, and I'm upbeat about it.
I got one for you. How many of you believe that the Conservatives are going to lead the next government after the election? Raise your hands. Okay, I don't know what. I understand you. For those who raised your hands over here, please let me smoke what you're smoking. Robert, your reaction to this?
Well, I thought I was the one asking questions. I mean, I think anyone can read the polls. It's very clearly Labour are very clearly the favourites to win the next election, but also, you know, Conservatives have been in power for quite a while. They've been through. The economy is in a bad state, but, you know, I think with inflation where it is and cost of living pressures where they are, like that kind of explains most of politics on its own. But I do think there's a challenge that, and I've identified this in my Sunday Times column, that, you know, if you are Penny, you talked about housing. 1955 election, I think it is. The Tories go in with campaign. Shout it from 1 million new housetops, vote Conservative. You know, with the extra pound off tax, vote Conservative. You know, there is a kind of list, you are feeling better than ever thanks to the Conservatives. We have done these things for you, which speaks back to the conversation you were just having. The question I always ask, and so I'm going to ask Penny now actually, come 2024, what are the Conservatives going to say to people? This is what we do it. This is how we've made your life better. This is how we've given you more opportunity. Mm-hmm.
So, look, I can't delve too much into the fourth session legislation or what may follow, because my advisor will taser me if I go out of lane. But first of all, and I quite often do this on a Thursday morning on the floor of the House of Commons, you can draw a direct comparison between our time in office and Gillian spoke about education earlier on, welfare reform, bringing 4 million people into employment, the fact that we did actually have a debate and got Brexit done. There are various things that we can point to, and on any policy area you care to name, we have made good progress. And the general track record with Conservatives is when we leave office, the country's in a better state. The reverse is true of the other lot. So there's a general comparison that we can make about those issues. People will have forgotten MRSA, C. diff, 45% youth unemployment, et cetera, under the former Labour administration. So those are the facts. But there is a more important factor, and I'm going to try and persuade Frank here. And I mean, the first thing is the public have not sealed the deal with Labour yet, and I think that goes to the heart of what they stand for. Keir Starmer has been doing a lot to try and be the sensitivity reader for socialism and edit out all of the, the twits and the trots. And I've called it cosplay conservatism. He's trying to look a little bit like my team. But if you look at what he's actually done on particular issues, on how he's tackled and approached industrial action, in what he's doing on North Sea oil and gas, on all of these issues, it's not right, and it's not with the values of the country. I always joke he needed a focus group to sing the national anthem. There's just something that isn't settled between him and the public yet. And with regard to us, there is a reason why we are the most successful political party in our country's history, and I believe it's the reason everyone put their hand up at the start. Because we believe in things that are in tune with the values of this country. Personal responsibility, looking out for other people, freedom, plurality of thought, all of those things. And that's why I'm optimistic about the possibilities for the next year. Because we are not the defenders of the status quo, and we're not old hat, even though we've been in office a while. What we do as Conservatives is create, amplify, and promote hope. That's what we're in the business of. That's what Thatcher was in the business of. And I think that if we can get ourselves back in the game and start to do things that are in tune with the values of this country, and I have my role in government, every piece of legislation, every statutory instrument comes across my desk. And my official there will testify, I do not let it pass unless it does those things, unless it helps people get from A to B. It does not get across my desk. I'm making myself very unpopular with a lot of departments. But that's what we need to get back to. And if we get back to that, and we can rebuild some trust along the way, and I know we've got some hellish problems to deal with, which is where I'm heading next, I think there is all to play for, and I think that historic fifth term is within our grasp. But we have to be true, not just to ourselves as Conservatives, but the values of the people of this country. And we haven't been in recent history.
I'd rather be here than in my country, because as difficult as it is in your government, there's still a sense of decency and civility that we've lost in mine. I was at Donald Trump, and I know this is on camera, but this is off the record. I was at Trump's...
We are being streamed.
Okay, off the record. I was at the very last public appearance of Trump as president, December 24th, 2020. It was the Christmas Eve. And after a couple hours, I got the guts to go up and ask him, what does the J in Donald J. Trump stand for? You know what he told me? Genius. I would much rather be here than be there, because there's still a goodness here, and there's a decency here, and there's a civility here. America's become mean. The U.S. has become something I never knew before. There was always a community spirit, and it affected you whether you were in the heartland or New York City. It's not that way anymore. Our cities don't work. Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, all these places that government made promises to the people. They can't keep the streets safe. They can't educate the children. They can't provide good jobs, and now people are leaving those places for Florida and Texas and Arizona, Tennessee, all over. Do you have, I know you probably are going to say no because you're focused on this country. Any advice for us before we go off the cliff?
So I, probably more than any other minister, have traveled around the US state by state, because when Biden said he wasn't particularly interested in a federal deal, I was a trade minister at the time, and I said, well, where does the regulation sit? It sits at state level. So I undertook the longest tour around the US of anyone since Churchill during the Second World War. And I went state by state. I spoke to everyone. I spoke to not just governors and the agriculture commissioner, but right down to councilmen. I've been all over the place. And I think there is decency, and I think there is still a sense of what America is and what America could be. But I think the only way to get back to that, it's the same hard graft that created the US in the first place. It's building that shared understanding. It's having the courage, and the courage in your political leaders. And there is, I mean, particularly at mayoralty level, you've got some great Republican leaders in the US. I mean, just phenomenal people with immense courage. And those people, and this applies to my colleagues in the Conservative Party today, we have to have the strength not to be pulled in particular directions by particular media groups or pander to particular constituencies. We have to have a real sense of what we're about. And I see that in your young leadership in the US. So you can be with us for a little while, Frank, but
then you're sending me home.
You're going to have to, well, if you want to lift a parliament in the next 10 minutes, you know, you're going to have to promise me you're not going to give up, on the US completely.
I'll walk.
I tried, folks, I tried.
We do only have a few minutes left before Penny has to go back and pour water on various fires. So the counter-argument to that, Frank, is that if you look at America's growth and its dynamism and its economy, it is still a vastly richer country than the UK and is getting richer still. The basic promise that your children's life will be better than yours is more realizable in the US because it has a more dynamic economy. And a load of the work of the CPS is devoted to trying to work out how we can echo that in the UK, because in the UK, not only is our growth, but there is a generational issue that, you know, there is a generation which, thanks partly to Margaret Thatcher, had opportunity, and they seized it with both hands. But that opportunity isn't there for the generation below. Is that something you both would agree with? And if so, how do we solve it?
I'll give you the statistics for the states. 70% of Americans, a little bit higher, feel that their quality of life is better off than their parents, and only 15% think it's worse. But when you ask them about their children and the next generation, 25% think it'll be better, 50%, 54% think it'll be worse. We've never been this negative. And I know how bad, by the way, I apologize. I'm sorry. I should not be trying to bring you down. The problem is, as a pollster, this is what I hear. This is what people tell me. So I can't help reflecting on what I'm being told. And it's never been this way. And that's the issue. And that's why when you come out against a culture war, my only response is, bless you. Because you could add another 10 seats, 15 seats to your total, but you'll destroy the country as a result. There are issues of cancel culture. They are trying to tell the next generation that they don't live in a great country, which they do, right here. The stuff that they're teaching at the universities is problematic. And people, if they speak out against it, they do get fired. That's all true. But there's a right and a wrong way to run an election and to win an election. And in the end, as important as the next election is, I hope you would agree, in a place like this, sponsored by an organization like yours, that the country is more important than the election, and the next generation is more important than this election. And I think we've lost that in America, and I hope you don't lose that here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I always ask myself if I'm seeing someone that I always say, one reason why I think young people are so fixated with rewriting the past and on those sorts of issues is because they're terrified about their future. I mean, either that the planet is going to burn down, or they're not going to be able to get on the property ladder, or be able to do the things that they feel they really want to do with their lives. So I think this is a very important aspect of the platform that both main parties offer at the next election. And as conservatives, we have to do more, particularly on home ownership. And the world has changed. Financial products that existed generations ago and are in the same, pretty much the same format as they were then, are just not applicable. It's not the same risk now. We have got to, across the board, modernize, look at risk in a genuine sense as it exists today, and understand what these individuals' dreams are. I mean, that's what we're here to do and deliver for them.
And I do want no one to misinterpret what I'm saying, because I've focused on Trump. No one made more promises to the American people that he broke in the weeks and months after he got elected than Joe Biden. You cannot buy your way and spend your way and create a government that is simply dishonest to the people that is meant to represent. We should never have had this inflation, which, by the way, is not inflation, it's affordability. But we should never have had this inflation. It would not have happened if Joe Biden hadn't tried to buy the love and appreciation and respect of the American people. So don't misinterpret my words. The government is not the solution, the government is the problem. But individuals and leadership can get us around that, and I see it here even more than I see it in the States.
So one final question for both of you in the seconds we have left. Can Britain become a country of opportunity again, and can the Conservatives become a party of opportunity? And how hard will it be? Or are they already those things?
I'm going to give you the final word. Let me go. So you should have the final word in this conversation.
Sure.
It has to. You don't have a choice. You have wonderful children, and you're a great dad. And you raise your children to be good and decent and honorable, and in the end, that's what really matters. Not how much they make, not how much taxes they pay, but the decency of them. This country has treated me so well over the last 2 years, and CPS is too cheap. The Center for Policy Studies is a wonderful think tank because you care about the quality of life of the people you represent. So good for you. You don't have a choice. You have to return back to first principles. And the brains and the policies of this think tank can make it happen. And when you bring people who represent and have the ability to take those policies and make them real, then you've earned and deserved your place in this country. I have faith in you, but you have to start today. And you can't look to anyone else you're sitting with. It's got to happen with you.
Well, I agree with Frank. And I'd also say, and very appropriately, as this is the Margaret Thatcher conference, that to deliver opportunity in the way that I understand it, it's not about government. Frank is right. It is about individuals. It's about enabling them to be able to take the responsibility that they feel they have. That's what people want to do. And to do that, you have to empower them. You have to have a very clear view about how you're going to deliver for them, and that's part of how you restore trust in politics and in Whitehall and in Parliament in particular. But most of all, it is about an attitude. I mean, that is the difference in how I describe the difference between the Labour Party and the Conservative Party when I go in to talk to schools. It's about an attitude and a determination. And we've had a terrible time of it over the last few years, the whole world has. But because of that, we need, now more than ever, clarity of thought and purpose about those things. So Frank is right, we've got to. And I also believe we can.
Nice to end on a positive and optimistic note. Thank you both so much, and hope we'll now have a coffee break, so please go and enjoy yourselves. But before you do that, please say thank you so much to Frank Luntz and Penny Moore.
I will give you a lift.